Cuando Julio César desembarcó en las costas de Bretaña con sus legiones romanas, tomó un paso valiente y decisivo para garantizar el éxito de su aventura militar. So when Julius Caesar landed on the shores of Britain with his Roman legions, he took a bold and a very decisive step to ensure the success of his military venture. Ordenó a sus hombres a marchar hasta el borde de las acantiladas del Dover y les ordenó que miraran hacia abajo el agua. So he ordered his men to march to the edge of the cliffs of Dover and commanded them to look down at the water below. Al asombro de los hombres, de los soldados, vieron cada barco en el cual habían cruzado el canal sumergido en llamas. To their amazement, the soldiers saw every ship in which they had crossed the channel engulfed in flames. Engulfed in flames. César había cortado deliberadamente cualquier posibilidad de la marcha atrás. You see, Caesar had deliberately cut off the possibility of retreat. Ahora que sus soldados no pudieran volver al continente, no quedaba nada más que ir, avanzar hacia adelante y conquistar. Y eso es precisamente lo que hicieron. And so the soldiers realized one thing, that they were unable to return to the continent. There was nothing left to do but to advance, to press forward, and to conquer. And that is precisely what they did. A menudo, los cristianos no somos capaces de avanzar espiritualmente porque no hemos tomado medidas audaces y decisivas para garantizar la victoria sobre nuestras luchas. Oftentimes, Christians aren't able to make spiritual progress forward because we have not made bold and decisive moves to guarantee our spiritual victory. We're still playing around. We're still looking to the side. We're still looking to the back and considering certain options because we have not taken bold steps to ensure that going back is simply not an option. Porque no hemos hecho decisiones para garantizar que mirar y ir hacia atrás no es una opción. Este día veo al apóstol Pablo obligado a darle ese mensaje a los hermanos de Galacia: no se vuelvan atrás. And so this morning, I see the apostle Paul compelled to communicate to his audience, the Galatians, to communicate that very message. Do not turn back. Do not turn back. Estamos en el medio de capítulo 4 de Gálatas. So we're now in the middle of chapter 4 of Galatians. Capítulo 1, vimos cómo Pablo se estableció como el apóstol, el mensajero que fue dado un mensaje específico, el evangelio de la gracia. In chapter 1, we saw that he was set aside as a messenger with a specific message, which was the gospel of grace. Capítulo 2, vimos que fue afirmado por los hermanos de Jerusalén. Y también que ellos reconocieron de que él había sido nombrado apóstol y que Dios estaba haciendo cosas grandes a través de su vida. In chapter 2, we saw that he received the right hand of fellowship, this affirmation, this encouragement from the apostles in Jerusalem, because they recognized that this was the very same gospel that they were preaching, and that God was doing some great things in and through his ministry. Capítulo 3 comenzó a dar un mensaje, un argumento tras otro sobre la importancia de reconocer que el Evangelio de la gracia es superior a la ley. In chapter 3, he gave argument after argument, communicating how the gospel of grace is superior to the law. Y aquí ya en el capítulo 4, ya está transicionando. Y aquí está apelando a los hermanos a que no consideren irse para atrás. Después de dar todos esos argumentos, que no hay razón por qué ni siquiera considerar mirar hacia atrás, mucho menos ir hacia atrás. Having given them all of these arguments regarding the superiority of the gospel of grace and why we need to be anchored on the gospel of Christ, he tells them that there's no reason to even consider going back, much less returning back. And so this is a pastor's plea, and you will see the words come out, the urgency of a pastor for his people. Usted va a escuchar, va a ver la urgencia de un pastor por su pueblo. Capítulo 4 de Gálatas. Chapter 4 in Galatians. For those of you who are not as familiar with the Bible, it is in the second part of the Bible. It's a New Testament. Okay? And this book is just after Corinthians, okay? Ephesians, Galatians. And we are now in chapter 4. Para los que no están muy familiarizados con la Biblia, se encuentra en el Nuevo Testamento, la segunda parte de la Biblia. Libro de Gálatas, después está de 1 y 2 Corintios, Efesios y luego Gálatas. Y es el capítulo 4, chapter 4. Esta sección se encuentra en versículo 8 al 20. No sé si vamos a poder alcanzar todos esos versículos hoy, pero esta es una unidad. The section here is 4:8 to 20. And I don't know if we'll get through it all today, but that is one unit. And so this is where I'm headed. Pero primero vamos a ver versículos 8 al 11. So the first part, the first division is 8 to 11. 8 to 11. Y aquí veremos que el apóstol Pablo les está diciendo a esta comunidad que no retrocedan a la esclavitud. The plea of the apostle Paul is this: do not regress. Do not return to slavery. Gálatas 4, 8 al 11. Galatians 4, 8 through 11. Pero en aquel tiempo, cuando no conocíais a Dios, erais siervos de aquellos que por naturaleza no son dioses. Pero ahora que conocéis a Dios, me encanta aquí la pausa, o más bien que sois conocidos por Dios, ¿cómo es que os volvéis otra vez a las cosas débiles, inútiles y elementales, a las cuales deseáis volver a estar esclavizados de nuevo? Observáis los días, los meses, las estaciones y los años. Temo por vosotros, que quizá en vano he trabajado por vosotros. You can hear the tone of this concerned pastor. However, at that time, when you did not know God, you were slaves to those which by nature are no gods. But now that you have come to know God, and I love this, he stops mid-sentence and says, wait, better yet, or rather to be known by God. Whew! Listen, it doesn't matter if nobody knows you, but that God knows you and you are part of His family. Man, oh man, that should get you up every single morning. No better coffee than that. None of your monster drinks, none of that stuff, right? To be known by God. Ser conocido por Dios. Qué mejor privilegio. How is it, after you were known by God, how is it that you, look at this, turn back again to the weak and worthless elemental things to which you desire to be enslaved all over again. That doesn't make sense. You've been freed. Why would you voluntarily take yourself back to jail, prison, enslaved, put on those handcuffs? Why? You're free. Live as a free person. ¿Por qué ser esclavizado siendo libre? ¿Cómo es que voluntariamente quieres regresar? You observe days and months and seasons and years. And here is again the plea. I fear for you that perhaps I have labored over you in vain. Strong words, palabras fuertes del apóstol Pablo. Después de pasar un tiempo en un argumento formal sobre la locura de obedecer a la ley para hacer progreso en la fe cristiana, él hace súplicas, peticiones, entre Gálatas 4, 8 al 20. So after having made argument after argument regarding the foolishness of obeying the law in order to make progress in the Christian faith, he makes some petitions here, some pleas with them in 4 to 8. Pablo les pide que no retrocedan a el legalismo o a la esclavitud, la religiosidad. He pleads with them. Do not return to legalism. Do not return to religiosity. Do not return to slavery. Pablo le recuerda la condición de los Gálatas anterior, antes de Cristo, que eran esclavos. He reminds them of their condition prior to the coming of Christ, which they were slaves. En contraste a los judíos, los Gálatas habían sido paganos que servían a otros dioses que en realidad no eran tales. Contrary to the Jews, the Galatians actually were pagans, and they actually observed, recognized these other gods, which Paul and others will say that there are no gods to begin with. Nevertheless, they observed and recognized these other gods. Los dioses de los gentiles quizás eran los dioses griegos y romanos, Júpiter, Zeus, Mercurio y Hermes. Some of the well-known deities in Galatia, these Greek and Roman gods, were Jupiter, otherwise known as Zeus, Mercury or Hermes. A los principios, otros dioses de ellos quizás eran los principios o preocupaciones de la vida. Other possible gods may have been these priorities of other things in life. El poder, el prestigio, las posesiones, okay, y las posiciones. Other gods that we create in our world are the preoccupation of life with things like power, prestige, possessions, and positions. We create these gods that this is our ultimate end. Our chief end is to attain these things. So they become our gods. Como hay un solo Dios, la adoración de otro Dios es adoración falsa y ser esclavo al pecado. Because there is but one God. Any worship of any so-called God, okay, is then to fall into slavery. Slavery of sin. Cuando los Gálatas vinieron a Cristo, obtuvieron el conocimiento del verdadero Dios personalmente e íntimamente. So when they came to know Christ personally, then they began a relationship with God, a personal relationship and an intimate relationship. So much so that, as we learned last week, that the Spirit of God compels us to say, Abba, Father, which speaks of that intimacy that we have with Him. Esa relación es tan íntima que el Espíritu Santo, dice Pablo, que los obliga a decir Abba, Padre, que es uno de esos términos que habla de la intimidad. Como les dije la semana pasada, es como que si un hijo le hiciera a su papá, papi. It is as a child telling their father, daddy. That's a very intimate word. Okay? Father is very, very proper, right? But daddy is very intimate. Decir padre es muy propio, pero decir papi es mucho más íntimo. Y esa es la relación que tenemos con Dios. And that's the relationship that we have with God, the Father, through the Son, Jesus Christ. Pero Pablo es rápido en aclarar que el que tomó la iniciativa fue Dios. No sea que ellos comiencen a pensar que tienen algo de qué jactarse, de qué presumir. But Paul, I love this. He is quick to point out, not that you know God, but rather that you are known by God. It's good theology right there. Because otherwise, see, we might be prone to think that we woke up one day and thought, I'm going to follow God today. I'm going to wise up today. Right? I'm going to get it together today. Right? Put my boots on, hard hat. I'm going to get it together today. See, now the focus is on me. What I did. Rather than what God did. What God has done for us. And so he is quick to point out that, no, that we are known by God. Que somos conocidos por Dios. Nosotros no lo andábamos buscando, hermanos. You and I weren't looking for God. On the contrary, we were hiding from Him. We were running from Him. We were fleeing. Usted y yo no andamos buscando a Dios. Estamos huyéndole. Él nos buscaba a nosotros. He is the one who sought us out. And this has been from creation. From the fall of the first man and the first woman. They fled, they hid, he pursued. Desde el principio ha sido así. Cuando el primer hombre y la primera hembra pecaron, ellos se escondieron, ellos se alejaron, pero Dios los persiguió. Y esa es la gracia de Dios. And that is the profound grace of God. Esto es reconocer que Dios es nuestro Salvador. This is to recognize that God alone is our Savior. Le conocemos porque Él nos conoció primero. The only reason that we know God is because He first introduced Himself to us. That's the only way that we began the process of getting to know Him. La salvación personal no es por algún mérito, sino por su bondad gratuita. So salvation, as we've been learning, it is not by personal merit, but rather it is because of the gratuitous goodness and grace of God. Aquí es donde se encuentra la primera súplica. Antes eras esclavos y ahora hijos. Antes no conocías a Dios, pero ahora sois conocidos y le conocéis. ¿Cómo es que queréis regresar a lo que es débil, inútil, elemental y que en realidad es ser esclavizado? So he makes his first plea here. In verse 9, he says, listen. Really 8, 9, he says, listen. Before you were slaves. Now you are children. Before you did not know God. Now you know God and are known by God. How is it? How is it that now you want to return to those worthless things? How is it that you want to return to those elemental things? How is it that you desire to be enslaved all over again? Tal vez los Gálatas no lo consideraban la esclavitud. Perhaps the Galatians didn't consider it slavery. Okay? Pero Pablo insiste que retroceder al legalismo es una inevitable consecuencia, la esclavitud. But Paul insists that to return to legalism, to return to the law, consequently leads to slavery. Okay? To be enslaved. La religión de los judaizantes no ofreció nada, puesto que estaba en bancarrota como cualquier que no está en el Señor. You see, the Judaizers were offering absolutely nothing to these Christians because their faith was bankrupt. There was nothing they could offer them. The only place where we can find our salvation, our hope, is in Jesus Christ. Any other offer is deficient. Any other offer, okay, is worthless. It is meaningless. Because only Christ can offer us true eternal salvation, abundant life, new life. Solo en Cristo podemos encontrar la nueva vida, la vida en abundancia y la vida eterna. Y esto se aplica principalmente en este pasaje a regresar al legalismo con la situación de los Gálatas. Pero quizás usted y yo no estamos en esa situación. Pero quizás sí estamos considerando algo en el pasado nuestro. And perhaps you and I are not in the very same situation as the Galatians. Perhaps you and I aren't thinking about returning back to, some false religion, paganism or whatnot, right, from the standpoint of connected to some religion. Perhaps that's not our major concern. But perhaps we're considering something from our past. We're considering returning to some master that had a hold, that had enslaved us in the past. And this is no different, you see. La aprobación de otros, quizás. Recibir nuestro valor por la opinión de otros. Perhaps we're struggling and considering going back to our old master of the approval, living by the approval of others. Okay? Living in order to be approved by others, and therefore if I'm not, then I feel somewhat incomplete. La autonomía, mi manera o ninguna manera. Perhaps we're considering living in autonomy, my way or no way at all. Quizás estamos considerando alguna adicción del pasado. Perhaps we're considering a previous addiction, el alcoholismo, la pornografía. Perhaps alcoholism, pornography has now a grip on us, or is trying to get a grip on us. And perhaps that is our struggle more so than returning to some false religion. El placer, el entretenimiento es el fin principal de algunos. For others, it may be the God, lowercase g, the God of entertainment. And so that God has his tentacles all up on us. And so all of life is all about entertainment. Any free time we get, it's about having fun. And our thoughts are constantly regarding entertainment and fun rather than how can I make an impact for God and for the world and for the gospel. Now, anybody who knows me, so just in case some of you don't know me, I'm not a killjoy either. I like to have a little fun too. But I'm just saying, all of life can't be that. I can't be watching the Rockets all day long. There are more important matters to attend to. You follow? Yeah, there's time of leisure. But when that's all we want to do, and it's, easily facilitated to us now, right? With places like Netflix and Prime TV and all kinds of stuff, Hulu, you name it. You can splurge day and night watching shows, right? Full seasons, okay? And as fun and entertaining as that might sound, we will have wasted a great deal of time when we could have been investing some of that time. Y quizás lo divertido que sea ver programas en las diferentes plataformas como Hulu, Netflix, okay, Prime, la televisión Prime, diferentes avenidas. Tal vez sea divertido, pero vamos a haber perdido tanto tiempo y no aprovechado el tiempo para invertir en cosas eternas, cosas de gran valor. Quizás para otros es el éxito, el Dios del éxito, el anhelo de alcanzar la cima, el ser el número uno. For others, we may be pursuing the God of success, to reach the top, right? To be number one. Para otros es las riquezas, la seguridad prometida por la acumulación del dinero, el poder, el prestigio y las posesiones. For others, maybe a struggle of riches or wealth, the security that is promised through the accumulation of money, of power, of prestige, and of possessions. Whatever those may be, ladies and gentlemen, that we might be contemplating, Paul says to you and I, do not turn back. Cualquiera de estas cosas que sea una tentación para regresar, para retroceder, el apóstol Pablo dice a usted y a mí, no vuelvas hacia atrás. There is no turning back. And I wish there was some way, and to some degree there might be, but I wish there was some way like a Julius Caesar, right? Burn all the ships. Nowhere to go but forward. Right? But sometimes like, that's too bold, Pastor. I got to have a retreat plan. That's our problem. We should see as no other alternative than to press forward. No debemos de considerar otra alternativa más que avanzar hacia adelante. Mirar hacia atrás, que no sea una opción. That turning back will simply not be an option for us. En lugar de vivir en una relación libre y gozosa, la religión, hermanos, se convierte en un formalismo externo. Rather than the Apostle Paul knows this quite well, rather than living a free, okay, and joyful Christian life, religiosity offers an external formalism, ritualism. Se hace una rutina de reglas y regulaciones. He knows here in verse 10 that it becomes now a routine of rules and regulations. These checklists. Okay? Esto es lo que debo hacer, esto y esto. En el caso de los Gálatas, observaban los días, que se refiere a los días sagrados en el judaísmo. They would observe these special days, and this is a reference to the special Jewish holy days. El sábado era uno de ellos. One of these holy days was the Sabbath, and all the things that went with it. Y todo lo que iba con el sábado. Los meses eran aquellas celebraciones que caían en el ciclo de los meses, como la luna nueva, mencionada en Números 28, 11 al 15. There were also observations of these months and festivals that came that were highlighted in the Jewish scriptures back in Numbers 28, 11 through 15. Las estaciones eran aquellas celebraciones que duraban más de un día. There were also these other celebrations that would last more than a day. Eran las fiestas, como los tabernáculos, la Pascua, etc. Some of these holy days would be known as the Passover, the tabernacles or booths, and even Pentecost, which was a major celebration. Pentecostés, que también era una celebración principal. Los años tenía que ver con el año de jubileo. The years had to do with some of these years of jubilee, 7th year or the 49th year, okay? These other types of celebrations. Pablo no estaba contra la práctica de estos días festivos, pero sí en que se impusieran estas actividades como parte de la salvación y así parte del cristianismo. To be clear, the Apostle Paul wasn't opposed to these celebrations per se. He wasn't opposed to celebrating these Sabbaths and different seasons of the year. He was opposed to the imposing of these beliefs in order to either gain salvation or retain salvation, which is what the Judaizers did. They added, they connected that as a means of being saved or as a means of staying saved. To that, the Apostle Paul would say negative. Si era para lograr la salvación o mantener la salvación, el apóstol Pablo diría definitivamente no. Pero es lo que hacían los judaizantes. But this is what the Judaizers did. Okay? ¿Quién quiere vivir de esa manera? Who wants to live this way? And you might be saying, well, probably not many people. But a lot of people want to live this way. Because now I can say, oh, I did this, I did that, so I must be good. Muchos les gusta vivir de esa manera. Porque entonces pueden decir, hice esto, y hice esto. Entonces debo estar bien con Dios. Al estilo de los fariseos y los saduceos. Similar to the Pharisees and Sadducees. Right? They fasted regularly. They made these long public prayers regularly. They made a big old scandal when they were about to give charity to the poor, right? These bells would go off because they wanted everybody to see what they were doing. So they had this checklist of all these things that they had done. Okay? And so that's why it is so attractive. Pero Pablo concluye en el versículo 11 con tristeza, que él tiene miedo de que él ha trabajado en vano. Look at this very sad statement that he makes in verse 11. I fear for you that perhaps I have labored over you in vain. Dice eso el apóstol Pablo. Porque si ellos siguen una vida llena de reglas, costumbres y rituales que en parte son esfuerzos humanos, sus esfuerzos fueron desperdiciados. See, the reason why Paul makes that statement is this. If you continue in a path of rituals, in a path of regulations, okay, and seeing them as somewhat necessary for becoming saved or maintaining your salvation, he says, my efforts were worthless. Why? Because his efforts were, salvation is by grace alone, by faith alone, through Christ alone. And so you're going contrary to that message that I have been giving you from day one. You see that? So my efforts are useless. We have not covered any good ground. We have not made forward progress because you're doing everything but walking by grace through faith in Christ. So then my efforts, okay, that really helped you go nowhere. Porque el apóstol Pablo dice, porque siendo libres, estaréis viviendo como esclavos. Because the point that he's ultimately making is this, that although free, you are seeking to live like slaves. Although you are free, you have placed yourself in the place of bondage. And that is extremely, extremely discouraging for any spiritual leader, any shepherd. Y eso es muy desalentador para cualquier líder espiritual. Muy desalentador. Porque el deseo de todo líder espiritual es que sus hijos espirituales puedan vivir según la gracia de Dios, según el evangelio de gracia. See, because the desire of every spiritual leader is that his children walk in the truth, walk in righteousness, walk in accordance with the gospel of grace. Okay? And so this is what John tells his audience in 3 John. Y eso es lo que le dice Juan, el apóstol Juan, a su audiencia. No tengo mayor gozo que este, que mis hijos anden en la verdad. Note the words of the apostle John. I have no greater joy than this, to hear my children walking in the truth. So watch this. If that gives a spiritual leader the greatest joy, what do you think gives him the greatest angst? The opposite. The opposite. Si eso le da el mayor gozo a un líder espiritual, ¿qué es lo que le da mayor tristeza a un líder espiritual? Lo opuesto, ¿verdad? El no vivir, el no caminar, el no andar en la verdad. Y ese es el temor que el apóstol Pablo tiene por ellos. And this is the fear that the apostle Paul has for them. Solo podremos concluir con este primer punto. La semana que viene continuaremos, pero quiero concluir de esta manera. We won't be able to move past this point today, so we'll continue it next week. But I want to conclude this way. Lamentablemente, existen muchas personas que están esclavizadas en su religión. Unfortunately, there are many who are enslaved in their religion. Tome por ejemplo a Juan Wesley, teólogo y fundador de la iglesia metodista. John Wesley was a theologian and the founder of the Methodist Church. Él estuvo en el Club de los Santos durante sus estudios postgraduados en Oxford. This individual was in what was known back then as a holy club. During his postgraduate studies in Oxford. You'd get beat up for being in a holy club today. You're in a what club? Él era un ministro e hijo de un ministro, recto en su conducta y llena de buenas obras. He was the son of a minister. He was righteous with regard to his conduct and with regard to his good deeds. Él y sus amigos visitaban a los presos en la cárcel, servían a los niños que vivían en los barrios marginales de la ciudad, proporcionándoles el alimento, ropa y educación. He and his friends would visit jailhouses. They would serve children within these marginalized communities, and they would provide food and clothing and education to them. Ellos observaban el sábado y el domingo. They used to observe Saturday and Sunday as the day of the Lord. They took it a step further. Then again, they were part of the holy club. Entonces observaban el sábado y el domingo. Asistían a la iglesia regularmente. They would attend church regularly. Daban su ofrenda. Estudiaban las escrituras. Oraban y ayunaban. So they would attend church regularly. They would give regularly. They would fast regularly. Sin embargo, ellos estaban confiando en sus obras como la base de su justicia, de su salvación, en lugar de poner su confianza en la persona y obra de Jesús. However, they were placing their faith on their good works as a means of attaining their salvation, rather than placing their faith in Jesus Christ as their sole and sufficient Savior. Unos pocos años después, Juan Wesley, en sus propias palabras, vino a la fe en Cristo como su único y suficiente Salvador, y estaba asegurado que sus pecados habían sido perdonados. And this is not by some third party. By his own words, by his own admissions, he did not come to faith until a few years later when he's making a trip to the Americas. And on that boat ride, the gospel was given to him, and he received it for the very first time. Y en ese viaje a las Américas, el evangelio se le fue dado y él lo recibió por la primera vez. Y por primera vez sus pecados fueron perdonados. And for the first time, his sins were forgiven. Considerando sus experiencias antes de ser salvo, él dijo, tenían la fe de un siervo, pero no de un hijo. Reflecting on his life prior to Christ, this is what he said. I had the faith of a slave, but not of a son. That's going to take some time. Reflect on that this week. I had the faith of a slave, not of a son. El cristianismo es una religión de una relación personal con Cristo Jesús y no obediencia a una lista de obras externas. No vivamos, hermanos, como esclavos, vivamos como hijos. You see, Christianity is a religion based on personal faith, a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. It is not on obedience to a list of external works. Therefore, we must not live like slaves, but rather seek to live like children. Let us not turn back. No volvamos hacia atrás. Oremos. Let us pray. Padre, te damos gracias, Señor, por tu palabra que nos exhorta en esta mañana, mi Dios, de una manera fuerte a permanecer en Cristo, a progresar, a hacer progreso en